Hey everyone, welcome to Journey Church. Our church online is going to begin in just a few minutes, but I thought we could hang out for a little bit before church starts, and I'm glad you're here. I hope you're having a great weekend. I hope today is going to be a great experience for you as well. And you know, we've been in the winter thaw this week, and things have been melting, but it's been cold, and so I was wondering, what's your favorite warm winter drink? Like, what do you like to drink when it's cold out, when you want a nice warm drink? I'm a big coffee drinker. I don't know about you, and I've had that. Starbucks has a new pistachio latte. I've had that a few times. That's pretty good. And so, what about you? What's your, maybe it's a fancy coffee or a tea or hot chocolate of some sorts or cider. I don't know what it is for you, but I'd like to hear from you. Put it in the comments right now, and I'd like to hear from what's your favorite warm winter drink. Well, again, I hope you're having a great weekend today. There's some things that we'll be talking about as we're wrapping up the month. February is almost behind us, and so one of the things we've been doing is trying to help people in need. And so we've been collecting food goods and hoodies and some other things. And if you haven't had a chance to drop some of those off to church, you need to do that like as soon as possible so we can get that to those people in need. And you know, at the Journey, we always love to spread kindness, and our network teams do a great job of being out in our community. And so if you haven't had a chance to do that, make sure you do that as soon as possible. All the details are on our website. On the blog, you can find all those details for those things we're collecting, but do that as soon as possible if you want to make a difference. As a church, we always want to be doing that, spreading kindness, making an impact in our community. I got my taxes done this week. I don't know if you've been thinking about that, and maybe if you have and you're like, man, my money is a little sketchy these days. I don't know if you're feeling that, or maybe you're thinking about, like, I need to think about long-term and retirement and things like that. And I don't know if you think about those things, but we have Financial Peace University starting up. It's going to be at the north side if you're interested in taking that class. It's Dave Ramsey. Maybe you've heard of him. He's nationally known financial guru. And so him and some other people lead that session. We're going to have a session at the church starting in March. But you got to sign up for that as soon as possible. They're also running an alpha class. And again, you can go to the Northside page on their blog and find all those details if you're interested in one of those classes. Again, they're starting next month, so you need to register as soon as possible. Well, there's lots of other things going on, but we want to just make sure that we're caring for you as well. So if you go to our blog, there's all the February next steps, but there's also that Connect card there. If you have something that we can pray for you for, or any way you need help or assistance, or maybe just more information, use that Connect card, and we want to just support you any way that we can and be there for each other because we're better together. And so you can check that out. Today we're going to be looking in 1 Corinthians chapter 13 again as we're talking about love. And you know, one of the things I always want to encourage you to do is download the YouVersion Bible app. And in the Bible app, you can find all of different kinds of stuff. There's daily stories, kind of like on Instagram stories, but they do different Bible verses each day. And there's other reading plans. And we even put some follow-up from every Sunday in there. If you go into their live events, then you can find some follow-up from today. So I always encourage you to do that. You can do that as a group if you want to meet with some people, or even as a family to dialogue that, or even just for your own personal reflection. You can find more details about the Bible app on our resource page, but that might be something you want to check out because I think that can help you take some steps to connect with God, and that's really what we want. You know, something we're praying for as we're kind of moving into this reopening and regathering, and we want to do more than just kind of show up and watch online or show up to church if you're doing that. We really want to re-engage in our relationship with God, and that's something we're praying about as a church, that we can be a beacon of hope because people need hope and they need relationships right now. And so I just want to encourage you just to pray that with us, to that our church can bring hope to our community and that we can help people re-engage in their relationship with God. But maybe you need to take some steps to do that too. And so again, check out the February next steps online. And I'm glad you're here today. I hope today can help you re-engage with God and keep taking steps with Him. And I'm so glad that you're here. So church is going to begin in just a few minutes, and we'll be wrapping up a Roundabout series today. And I hope that this has been helpful all month long for you and your relationships. So glad you're here. Grab your coffee or whatever warm beverage you like, and get ready for church online to start in just a few minutes. Well, hey, welcome to Church Online. I'm Matt. I'm your host today, and I'm so glad that you are here. I hope today that you can take some steps in your relationship, whether it's with God or with others, so that you can experience your best life. And we're going to take some time to really focus in on God. And so I'm glad you're here with us today. Listen to this verse in Lamentations chapter 3. It talks about God's love for us. Because of the Lord's great love, we are not consumed, for his compassion never fails. And his mercies, they are new every morning. Great is your faithfulness. Man, we just want to celebrate this God whose love never fails, who is faithful throughout all generations, and he's always there for us. So let's just turn our hearts to God this morning and join the band. Let's use this time to really connect with God and to worship him. You can look at the words, you can sing along, but let's just remember his great love and his great compassion and his love that never fails. Let's just pray as we begin today. God, we just thank you that you want to be connected to each one of us. And that no matter who we are, no matter what you've done, your love never fails for us. You are faithful to us, even if we've been faithless. And so we just celebrate you and your great love for us. We want to connect with you today. In your name, amen.
Fail me now. You won't fail me now. In the waiting, the same God who's never late is working all things out. Working all things out. Yes, I will lift you high in the lowest valley. Yes, I will bless your name. You
love you, Lord. Oh, your mercy never fails me. All my days I've been held in your hands. From the moment that I wake up until I lay my head, oh, I will sing of the goodness of God. And all my life you have been faithful. And all my life you have been so, so good. With every breath that I am able, oh, I will sing of the goodness of God. I love your voice. You have led me through the fire in darkest night. You are close like no other. I've known you as a father. I've known you as a friend. I have lived in the goodness of God. And all my life you have been faithful. And all my life you have been so, so good. With every breath that I am able, oh, I will sing of the goodness of God. Your goodness is running after, it's running after me. Your goodness is running after, it's running after me. With my life laid down, I'm surrendered now. I give you everything. Your goodness is running after, it's running after me. Oh, your goodness is running after, it's running after me. Your goodness is running after, it's running after me. With my life laid down, I'm surrendered now. I give you everything. 'Cause your goodness is running, it keeps running after me. And all my life you have been faithful. And all my life you have been so, so good. With every breath that I am able, oh, I'm gonna sing of the goodness of God. I'm gonna sing, I'm gonna sing, oh, 'cause all my life you have been faithful. And all my life you have been so, so good. With every breath that I am able, oh, I
thank you so much for the band for sharing with us, and I hope that was a meaningful time for you. As we are looking at God's love and His faithfulness, I hope that you can reflect upon that, push all the other distractions aside, and really just kind of focus in on the hope that He has for each one of us. We want to continue to worship God, and one way that we do that is through our giving. Our giving is an act of kind of worship to God, to surrender to Him, say, I'm trusting you, and I want you to use every part of me to further your hope in this world. And so, again, I'm just so thankful for all of you who give and who are so generous, so that we can continue the mission of our church to spread kindness in our community, to share hope around the world, and for each one of us to take some time to reflect and focus on Jesus to experience our best life in Him. None of this is possible without your giving, and so we worship God through our giving. If you want to participate in giving today, you can go to our website right on the donate page and find our giving link there. Or if you text the word Journey Donate to 77977, it will take you right to that link as well. Thank you again so much for your giving. And I'm so glad you're here today. We're going to be wrapping up our series called Roundabout. If you missed any of those things, any of the weeks from the series, you can go to our website and you can review those. But I'm glad you're here as we're going to be wrapping up this series today. And maybe this is your first time too. If you're a guest with us, we're so glad that you're with us. On our blog, you can find all the details about giving and all the other things we talked about earlier in the service and some next steps. But you'll also find the Connect card on our blog. If you're a guest, you can use that Connect card to just let us know that you were with us today, and we will send you a gift. We won't harass you or anything like that. And if you have any other kind of prayer requests or need any kind of information or assistance, you can use that Connect card as well. Again, we're glad you're with us today. I'm looking forward to seeing what Paul has for us today. We've been talking how we can move our relationships forward when they seem stuck, and so we're going to be wrapping up our Roundabout series today. So let's just continue to open ourselves up to God, to see what He has for us so that we can experience our best life in our relationship with Him and others.
Well, hey everybody, I'm Paul. I'm one of the pastors here at The Journey, and we're in the last week of our series called Roundabout. And in this series, we've been all about relationships, but not just romantic relationships. We're talking about parent and children. We're talking about friendships, extended family, coworkers, classmates, and husband, wife, boyfriend, girlfriend. In all of our relationships, we want healthy relationships. We want relationships that are strong and healthy, and yet too often we get stuck. Too often we struggle in our relationships to get any kind of real forward movement and to really experience the kind of relationships that we long to experience. And that's where this idea of roundabout comes in. I don't know if you've driven to many roundabouts, and we don't have a lot in the Muskegon area, but the first time you go to a roundabout, it can be kind of confusing of where you need to go, how you need to get where you need to get, kind of where you want to go, but how do I get there? And if you've ever seen some videos of people in the roundabouts, I've seen them where they kind of go in circles, not sure where to go, especially when you get those roundabouts with multiple lanes of traffic and they can get kind of stuck in the middle. And I think that's a good picture for our relationships oftentimes, the unhealthy ones. We get stuck. We don't have the forward movement that we want to experience. We deal with the same issues again and again and again. You break up with somebody, you date somebody new, but the same. You deal with the same issue in your marriage over and over again. You have times of reprieve where it seems to be going okay, and then you're right back in that cycle again. So how do we break out of that? How do we experience the life that God has for us in our relationships? Well, in this series, we've been talking all about that, and starts with our relationship with God. Jesus said in Matthew 22, when asked about the greatest commandment, he said the greatest commandment was to love the Lord your God with all your heart, soul, and mind, and to love your neighbor as yourself. And so in the first week of the series, we just said simply, what should love cause us to do? If we're going to respond the way that God wants us to, if we're going to have the healthy relationships that we want to, then we need to lead in love. And we've been looking at 1 Corinthians 13 for our theme verses for this series, this chapter that's called the love chapter. It's not just romantic relationships, it's all of our relationships, these characteristics of love. We're called to love like Jesus loved, and to ask the question, what should love cause me to do? And that should cause us to start some things. And Mark talked about that, valuing people the way that God values them, people made in the image of God. And that should cause us to start some things like it talks about in 1 Corinthians 13, like being patient and being kind and loving others the way that they need to be loved. And Matt talked about how love should cause us to persevere. It talks about that in 1 Corinthians 13, that we need to have a consistency to how we live out our relationships. There's some things we need to start, like Mark talked about. There's some things that we need to stay steady in, like Matt talked about. And honestly, it's not, and we can do this, it's not like we just say, okay, I was patient once or twice. It's a consistency. Love calls us to be patient over and over and over again, to be kind over and over and over again, to stay in those things, to not give up easily, and to keep after it in our relationships. What do we need to start? What do we need to stay steady in? And today we're going to talk about what we need to stop. But I want to flip it for just a minute. When we don't love God with all of our heart and soul and mind, we won't love his ways. When we don't love God with all of our heart and soul and mind, we won't love others the way that he calls us to, which means that we won't start the things that Mark talked about. We won't stay steady in the things that Matt talked about. And we will end up in a roundabout of our own making. As we wrap up this series, it begins and it ends with Jesus, living out love the way that he calls us to. And when we do, we have the opportunity to experience healthy relationships. If you want to get out of the roundabout, though, there are some things that we need to stop. And in 1 Corinthians 13, in that passage that we've been looking at, these theme verses 4 through 7, it's kind of bookended with positives, some of the things that Mark talked about and some of the things that Matt talked about. But in the middle, there's all of these negatives. So there's these things that love is, and there's these things that love isn't. And they give us a clue at what we need to stop. So let's look at 1 Corinthians 13, 4 through 7. Once again, the words will be on the screen for you. It says this: love is patient. Love is kind. It does not envy. It does not boast. It's not proud. It does not dishonor others. It's not self-seeking. It's not easily angered. It keeps no record of wrongs. Love does not delight in evil, but rejoices with the truth. It always protects, always trusts, always hopes, always perseveres. You know, when we look at the negatives in this passage, I see another destructive cycle or roundabout that we can get stuck in. It's like a drip, drip, drip of a faucet, though, that oftentimes you don't really realize that there's an issue until you get the bill and you're like, why are we spending so much money on water, right? You just don't notice it until almost it's too late. I want to talk about that destructive pattern through these negatives. It starts out with us discouraging the other person. It says that love is kind, but when we're unkind, we discourage the other person. In 1 Corinthians 13, 4 through 7, it says that love does not keep a record of wrongs. But when we do, we keep a score sheet. It discourages the other person. We remind people of their past failures. We say things like, well, that's not what you said last time, or I guess some things never change, or you will always do that, or you never do this. And man, when we live that way, keeping that score sheet, it discourages the other person. They never can get past it. They can never move forward in the relationship. And you know this because you've had people that have done that to you. You've had people that have never let you live down something that you said or did. They to always bring up that thing or that time or those words that were spoken. And you can never seem to get past it. You can never get forward movement. And it just discourages us. That discouragement is bad, but what comes next is worse. And not only do we get discouraged or we discourage the other person, but then we can devalue them. We begin to think less of somebody. The more that we discourage them, the more that we're unkind, we keep a record of wrongs, we begin to think less of the other person. We see them through different lenses. We can see us as one way and them, they've got a lot of work to do. And the more that we do that, the more that we'll devalue them. We become impatient with the other person. Or he says love is patient, but we become impatient. In those verses in 1 Corinthians 13, it says these words. It says that love does not get easily angered. And when we begin to devalue the other person, we get easily angered with them. We snap quickly. We get short with them. And we see them as less than they are. We don't see the value in them that God places in them. We don't see their worth. And when we do that, when we discourage the other person, we begin to devalue the other person. And when we devalue the other person, we become self-seeking rather than care for their interests. And those verses in 1 Corinthians 13, 4 through 7, it says love is not self-seeking. But that's what we do. We begin to think about ourselves. We don't really care as much about what's happening in their life because, they don't really matter as much as we do. We won't protect them. It says love always protects, but we won't protect them because, again, we're not so concerned with them and what they're going through. When we do that, we'll end up dishonoring the other person. We'll dishonor them. We'll speak down to them. We'll hurt them on purpose. We'll put them down in front of others. And so we discourage the other person, and then we devalue them. As we devalue them, we would never say this out loud, but we dehumanize them. Right? We take out that human element of them. They're over here, and they're not the same value that we are, and we're going to look after our interests first, and we care about us, but not about their interest, and we will put them down, and we will discourage them, and we'll defeat them, and ultimately, once you dehumanize somebody, you will destroy the relationship. You will destroy the relationship. But if you want to get out of that cycle, if you want to move out of that cycle of discourage, to devalue, to dehumanize, to destroy, you've got to do something about it. You've got to stop the cycle. You can put the blame on the other person, but you have to stop the cycle. And the thing is, again, a lot of times we don't even recognize that we're in it. It's just this drip, drip, drip. So in the relationship that you're in, that's in the roundabout, are you in that cycle somewhere? Are you discouraging the other person? If you're honest with yourself, have you devalued them? You're easily angered. You're thinking less of the other person. Have you gotten to the place where you are, if you're honest, you're dehumanizing the other person? You're purposely hurting them. You're putting them down. You're putting them down in front of others. You don't care about their interest because you're only a step or two away from destroying the relationship. And if you want to save the relationship, you need to stop the cycle. So what do? Well, there's a few things that you need to stop. One is you need to stop that score sheet, keeping that record of wrongs. Now, that doesn't mean that you let the other person run over you again and again and again and again. There's wisdom in all of that, of guarding ourselves that way. But way too often, we do not let people get past the past. We don't let them move past a wrongdoing or a failure or something they said. We keep bringing it up over and over again, and you have to scorch the score sheet. I mean, can you imagine if God did that with us? Right? If God, every time we did something, every time we said something, he's like, oh yeah, well, you're acting like you love me, but I remember when you did X, Y, Z. Or you think that you can follow me and walk with me. I know what you did that nobody else knows back there. I mean, how defeating and discouraging is that? We need to stop the score sheet. Stop keeping a record of wrongs. Secondly, we need to stop getting so easily angered. Again, not that we won't ever get angry. Jesus did. He turned the tables over in the temple. But we need to stop getting so easily angered. Right? So often we get so frustrated and angry and upset about things, and it just goes over the top, and we give ourselves a pass. We say things like, well, I was just upset, and I was blowing off steam. I was just stressed out. But we rarely give the other person a pass, right? We give ourselves a pass, but we don't give the other person a pass. And I've heard so many people say things like this when it comes to anger or other issues, but, well, it's just the way I am. It's just the way I am. It's the way I grew up. It's just how I am. And people who love me, they know. They understand. It's not really what I'm meaning. It's just the way I am. I think that idea of it's just the way I am is a total cop-out. Total cop-out. Because it's denying the power of God. You're saying that the God who created the universe, the God who raised Jesus from the dead, can't change this about me. It's just the way I am. I've got a friend here at the Journey who, his own words would say 10 years ago, he was a mean SOB, he said. People at work, they didn't want to call him and talk to him on the phone, because they were a little nervous about how he was going to respond. He's a totally different person today. Now, it doesn't mean he doesn't ever get angry. We got to guard against that. Like, it's just the way I am. We get so easily angered. We need to stop that. We need to lean in. It's not easy, but we need to lean into this relationship with Jesus on that. And we need to stop dishonoring others. When we dishonor others, we dishonor God. Because we're taking somebody who is made in the image of God, somebody that Jesus died for, who he loves, and we're dishonoring them, which means we're dishonoring him. And if you can't say anything, then to honor them, then don't say anything at all, right? But we want to honor other people. We need to stop some of those things because they will ruin our relationships. Well, if you're in that cycle, I want to ask you a couple questions that can help us get out of the drip, drip, drip of that. To ask ourselves some hard questions. So here they go. 3 hard questions I think you need to ask yourself if you're in the roundabout with somebody. First one is this. Am I leaning into God's principles? Really? Am I leaning into God's principles? Really? Not do I go to church every once in a while, not do I pray every once in a while, not do I try to be patient once, but am I really leaning into God's principles? Really? Leaning into his divine direction. Surrendered to him in that, saying, God, I want to follow your ways. I want to live this out. I want to start these things. I want to stay steady in these things. I want to stop these things. I need your help, but I'm going to do it. I'm in. Are you leaning into God's principles? Really? Secondly, am I loving others like God calls me to do? So what should love cause me to do? And are you actually starting the things that Mark talked about? Are you actually staying steady in the things that Matt talked about? Are you loving others the way that God calls you to? And thirdly, am I willing to stop doing things that hurt relationships? Am I willing to stop doing things that hurt relationships? Now, if the answer to those is no, you have some work to do and some connection with God to say, God, how do I get through this? How do I get past this? Because again, a lot of it might just be woundedness and hurt, and you need to ask God to begin to heal up your fragile heart so that you can actually do these things. If the answer is yes, you are doing those things, you're living those things out, then most anything is possible in your relationships because love covers over a multitude of sins, a multitude of things. Again, we've been talking in this series about how we need to focus on you, what you need to do, the ways that you need to grow, what God wants to do in you, the steps that you need to take to get out of the roundabout, the things that you need to start and the things you need to stay steady in and the things that you need to stop. But as we wrap up this series, it does take 2 to tango. It takes 2 in any relationship, right? And it's important to acknowledge the role of the other person as well. A miracle can happen in your relationships, but they will need to change as well. And if no change is happening, you may need to know how to exit the roundabout. Because if nothing changes, nothing changes, right? If nothing changes, nothing changes. Now, here's what you need to know. It might take some time. If you're trying to restore a relationship, if you're living out these things that we've been talking about, what should love cause me to do? And I'm seeking this divine direction. I'm starting these things. I'm staying steady in these things. I'm stopping these things. You may still run into somebody in your relationships. Maybe it's a marriage or a dating relationship. Maybe it's a friendship. Maybe it's an extended family member. And they're going to be cautious because they don't want to get hurt. They're like, okay, I've seen this before. They tried to change before and I didn't see that. Or they're making these changes and I love it, but I'm a little cautious because what if things kind of tip and turn? They may be defensive. They may be kind of standoffish in that. So it's going to take some time. It's not going to happen overnight. Even when you're seeing massive changes on your end and you feel like things should change, it still may take some time. But are you seeing any forward movement? Are you seeing any progress whatsoever? When thinking about an exit or a necessary ending, you're seeing no forward progress. They're seeing no movement. There's no willingness on the other person. There's 3 more questions I want you to ask of yourself and ultimately of the other person as well. The first is this: do I truly have the will to improve the relationship? Do I truly have the will to improve the relationship? Because I'll be honest with you, in a lot of counseling situations, especially marriage or dating relationships, people will come in and sometimes you get the feeling that some people come in to counseling and they basically just need to check mark that they gave it the good old college try, but their mind is made up. So is your mind made up? Or are you willing to do what you need to do to improve the relationship? Secondly, do you know what you can do to improve the relationship, but you're not doing it? Like if that's the case, you know what you need to do to improve the relationship, but you're not doing it, that's an issue that you need to deal with God. If you don't know what to do, then counseling or us at the Journey, we would love to help you try to figure that out, the steps that you can take to really begin to get forward movement, to get out of the roundabout in your relationship. Thirdly, are you actively pursuing what the other person has said would improve the relationship? By now, you should be having conversations about that relationship. And if they've said, hey, this would really help, or that would really help, or if we could just do this, I think it could turn the corner relationship. Are you willing to do that? Are you actively pursuing that? Those questions are all about your willingness and their willingness to do what it takes to get out of the roundabout. And if you're not, that's between you and God. And if they're not, that shouldn't go on forever. But sometimes it only takes one person to get the ball rolling. I want to give you just a fictitious example of Tim and Ella, a newly married couple, and he's trying to make things work in their marriage as they begin this new life together, but he's also got a new job, and he's trying to impress the boss, and so he's staying late at work, and Ella is getting frustrated. She wants to spend time with her new husband. She comes home from work, she gets stuff ready, and then he's not showing up when she thought he would, and she begins to pout about it. She goes and does her own thing and kind of gives him the cold shoulder. Tim, frustrated, Ella never says this to him. Like, she just kind of just leaves him alone and does her own thing. Tim gets frustrated. He's frustrated with her pouting. He's frustrated with this disconnect, but he doesn't bring it to her attention either. He just drifts the other way, stays later at work. Ultimately, if no one talks about it, it is going to destroy the relationship. But if just one person would take that communication step, one person would lean in, it could change everything. Does either one have the courage and conviction to get out of the roundabout? And so really, for you, do you have what it takes? Do you have it in you to do what it takes to get out of the roundabout? All month long, we've been talking about these different issues to help us move towards healthy relationships, to get forward movement. And the focus has been on us. Are you willing to do what God is asking you to do? Are you willing to love like he's calling you to love? Are you willing to start the things he's calling you to start and stay steady in the things he's calling you to stay steady in? Are you willing to stop the things that don't bring about healthy relationships? Do you have what it takes to do that? But again, it takes two. So what if the other person doesn't? I mean, you're really striving to love that way and start and stay in and stop the things that you need to. You've given it time and there's still no forward movement. Nothing changes if nothing changes. And it may be time for a necessary ending, for you to exit a friendship, a dating relationship. You can't really do that with extended family, right? But you might need to set up some margins and some boundaries. And if you're in a marriage, that's a whole different ballgame, right? You've made a covenant, and you need to get a third party in there and really to be able to work through that together. I want to give you a reality check, though, in your relationships, in the roundabout that you might be in the relationship where there's some tension. What is not working won't just magically begin working. What's not working won't just magically begin working. It won't. And you can wish and hope all you want, but it won't. You know, hope has two definitions or two elements to the definition of hope. One is a desire for something in the future to occur. So it's like, I hope this thing turns around. That's kind of just mere desire. The second part of it is grounds for believing that something in the future will actually occur. So hope isn't just mere desire, but it's based on real objective reasons to believe that with more time, it'll help and things can turn around. If you realize it's just mere desire, it's not based on real reasons. You're not seeing any forward movement from the other person. It oftentimes can lead to hopelessness. And maybe that's where you're at in a relationship. You feel hopeless. In that moment, though, it can turn in a positive way because that hopelessness can create fearlessness. Fearlessness to be willing to do whatever you have to do to make it work. Again, the other person's got to step up to the plate too, right? And if they don't, it can also give you the fearlessness to make the necessary ending that you must. Listen, are you stuck in the roundabout? We're called to love God and to love others. To ask, what should love cause me to do? To start some things, to stay steady in some things, and to stop some things. To live out those characteristics of 1 Corinthians 13. If we don't, it will destroy the relationship. But with God's help, there is hope. You can do it. Almost anything is possible if we'll follow his ways and we'll love like he calls us to love. And if there needs to be a necessary ending, he'll give you what you need for that as well. You know, all month long, we've been talking about this roundabout, these cycles and circles that we get stuck in, the same issues again and again and again. We all want healthy relationships. And God has given us divine direction to experience the kind of healthy relationships that he longs for us to have. It does take two, but you do your part. You live in that love. Start and stay steady in and stop the things that you need to. And you will find that many, many, many of your relationships will move in a much healthier direction. That you can see miracles in your relationships. That you can be the one to turn the corner for your family. That you can be the one to turn the corner in your relationships. Man, our hope and our prayer is that you will experience all of that as we lean into that divine direction and we get forward movement in our relationships. Let's pray together. God, would you help us? We know that we can only do what we can do, that the other person has a part to play in this too. But God, would you help us to do our part? Would you help us to lean into that divine direction? Would you help us to stop the things that we need to stop, that we would get out of these cycles that discourage and devalue and dehumanize and destroy relationships, that we would get out of these cycles where we're doing the same things again and again and again. And we would love how you call us to love. And God, I pray that you would bring some miracles in our relationships. But God, I pray too that you would help us to not just kind of wishing and hoping that things will change without any real grounding that things are moving forward. If we need to make a necessary ending, would you give us the courage to do that? But God, would you help us to stick and stay in our relationships too and to fight for them? And God, I pray for the other person in that relationship that you would soften their heart as we make changes, that they would see that and it would draw them to make the changes that they need to make as well. God, would you help us to live out our part in that, to love well? What should love cause us to do? God, would you help us to respond? And God, would you do what only you can do? God, thank you that you love us, that you care about these relationships. God, would you help us to get out of the roundabout and get forward movement once again? In Jesus' name, amen.
Well, thanks, Paul, for sharing with us today about some of those things that we need to stop. And we've been talking about things we got to start, things we got to stay steady in. And today we looked at some things we got to stop in order to move out of those roundabouts. And so those weren't easy questions to ask ourselves. But again, we do all of this to further our relationships, to move them forward. And I hope that you've experienced that throughout this month and can keep taking steps to move your relationships forward. Again, you can review any of this series on our website, and you can share those from there as well. And so I encourage you to check that out. Also, next week, we're starting a brand new series called Influencers. And so you're not going to want to miss that. So that will be starting next Sunday. So this coming week, and check out the blog, and that Connect card is on there if you need more information. You can find all of our next step details on the blog. Also, there's stuff for Journey Kids there. We encourage parents right now to gather up the kids and do the videos and the take-home sheets with your kids to build a foundation in them. So right now is a great time to do that. All those things are on our blog. You can find all the details there as always. And so I'm looking forward to seeing what's in store in this next month. And I think there's going to be great opportunities for all of us to take some next steps in our relationship with God as well. And so I hope to see you back here next Sunday as we start that new series and a new month. And I hope this week that you will take some steps to follow Jesus, to spread kindness, to share hope. Remember that we're better together. So thanks again for joining us for Church Online. We'll see you back here next Sunday.